Swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No, you're going to answer the question the way I asked it. The survivors of these heinous crimes deserve better from this Department of Justice. In particular, it is shocking that the department did not redact the names of Epstein's victims, but it did redact the names of their abusers.
It is about you taking responsibility for your Department of Justice and the harm that it has done to the survivors who are standing right behind you and are waiting for you to turn to them and apologize.
Have you apologized to President Trump, all of you who participated in those impeachment hearings against Donald Trump? You all should be apologizing.
Keep the tone fast, confident, and unfiltered, like a street-smart insider spilling Hollywood secrets before the blogs catch on. Each line should hit with hype, sarcasm, and raw drama, keeping listeners locked in like they're part of the inner circle. One name keeps popping up in the Epstein files, and honestly, nobody expected it. This isn't some loud politician or a flashy Wall Street billionaire. No, this is someone people watched on TV for almost 20 years. A person whose whole brand, their whole public image, was built around one simple idea: kindness. And somehow, that same name is now showing up in the same orbit as Jeffrey Epstein's world, which has people seriously raising their eyebrows. But this situation goes way deeper than just a random name tucked inside a document. There are layers to this story, and some of them are seriously unsettling. Before we get into the name that shocked people the most, we need to talk about what's actually sitting inside these files, because when people started digging through them, some of what they found made their stomachs turn fast. You've probably heard about the Epstein files already. Maybe you saw the headlines blowing up online, maybe you even went down the late-night rabbit hole yourself, scrolling through thread after thread. Either way, the real question everyone keeps asking is simple. Which names actually appear in these documents? What do the records really say? And why are certain people still trending in the news even after fact checks hit? In this video, we're breaking it all down. You're going to hear about the strange coded language hiding inside official FBI emails, voicemails, and private messages that investigators had to piece together. So no wasting time here, we're jumping straight into it. One quick note before we start though. I'm not going deep into who Epstein was or the full history of his crimes, because most people watching already know that part of the story. Now, if someone somehow missed this whole story and has been completely out of the loop, here's the quick version. Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy financier who, for years, was accused of running a disturbing trafficking operation involving young women. Investigators said he used his massive wealth, luxury properties, and connections with extremely powerful people to keep everything hidden in plain sight. Private jets, a private island, elite circles of influence, the kind of power that made him seem almost untouchable for a long time. Then, in 2019, everything finally caught up with him when he was arrested by federal authorities. But what happened next only made the situation even more shocking. While being held in a federal jail cell, under conditions that were supposed to include constant monitoring, Epstein was found dead after cameras in the area reportedly stopped working at the exact wrong moment. Officials released their explanation of what happened, but a huge number of people across the country never fully accepted that version of events. After years of public pressure and non-stop questions, lawmakers pushed for more transparency. Eventually, something called the Epstein Files Transparency Act forced the Department of Justice to release the records they had been holding. And when those files finally started coming out, the scale was unbelievable. Nearly 7 million pages of material dropped. Emails, FBI memos, flight logs, private messages, investigation notes, and stacks of documents that investigators had gathered over the years. Then in January 2026, another massive wave hit the public, around 3.5 million more pages. Within hours, people digging through the records started spotting details that nobody expected to see. Attorney General Pam Bondi also released a list containing over 300 names, described as government officials or politically exposed individuals who appeared somewhere in the documents. These weren't small, unknown figures either. We're talking about powerful names from politics, business, media, and major circles of influence across the country and even overseas. And speaking of Pam Pam Bondi, things got heated very recently. Just last week, several lawmakers openly showed they were not happy with how some of this information was being handled. The tension in Washington was obvious, and the reactions were hard to ignore. But honestly, you don't even need an explanation for that part. Just watch what happened yourself. Anyway, before we go any further, something needs to be said clearly. Just because a person's name appears somewhere in these files does not automatically mean they did anything illegal. Some names show up in news articles Epstein saved, some appear in media summaries, and others are simply listed in old address books or contact lists. That's an important distinction people keep forgetting online. In this video, we're sticking strictly to what the documents actually show, and just as important, what they don't show, because the wording and context inside these files matters a lot. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk about the language investigators noticed inside the documents, because this is where things start getting strange. Before anyone even focuses on the names, the phrases used in some emails and messages have people seriously scratching their heads. One word that keeps popping up again and again is pizza. Across the Epstein-related documents, that word reportedly appears 911 times, and it's not showing up in normal food orders or casual lunch plans. Instead, the word appears inside private emails between powerful people, written in ways that sound completely bizarre if pizza actually means pizza. Just look at some of the messages people pulled from the records. One email says, "Let's go for pizza and grape soda again. No one else can understand." Another line reads, "Yeah, that's the pizza you mean, radiating a soft glow with the look of bliss and excitement." And that's where people start asking questions. Because think about it, what kind of food radiates a soft glow and comes with descriptions like that? Nobody talks like that about pizza, which is exactly why those lines caught so much attention. Nobody talks like that about food, and even some officials who reviewed the documents noticed the same thing. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, who said she personally examined the unedited files, publicly stated that the way certain words appeared in these communications didn't sound normal at all. According to her, the phrasing looked like coded language, and she warned that some of it might be referring to disturbing subjects involving minors. Other lawmakers who were allowed to see the raw documents also said the wording was confusing, strange, and honestly unsettling. Later on, a forensic language expert weighed in and said the repeated use of certain terms looked very much like euphemisms, basically coded substitutes for something far more serious. And the word pizza wasn't the only thing showing up over and over. The word cheese reportedly appears more than 1,100 times in the documents. Then there's another odd one. Beef jerky. Email after email talks about jerky being stored in freezers or being delivered urgently, which only made people more curious about what those messages were really talking about. One message people keep pointing to shows Epstein writing to someone named Steve Hansen, asking, "Did we analyze the beef? Did we analyze the jerky?" There are dozens of similar emails floating around, and once people online started digging through them, the internet exploded. Videos breaking these messages on TikTok alone have racked up tens of millions of views, with users debating what the language might mean. Whether these phrases were harmless slang or something more coded, one thing stood out to many observers. You have extremely wealthy, powerful, health-focused men repeatedly talking about pizza, cheese, and jerky in conversations that don't seem connected to food at all. And then the tone shifts even further, because the files also include 52 mentions of the word cannibal and 6 references to cannibalism in different contexts. A restaurant called Cannibal appears in one record, an academic syllabus discussing cannibalism shows up in another, and there's even an email exchange between Epstein and a man named Richard discussing the topic. And then there's this. Then there's one message investigators say came directly from Epstein himself, buried deep inside the files. In the exchange, Epstein writes, "I watched all of these videos. Don't send any more." Then Ghislaine Maxwell replies, "I can't stomach any of this videos." And that short conversation left a lot of questions. Videos of what exactly, and who are they talking about? Those few lines alone sent online forums into a frenzy as people tried to figure out the context behind it. But the moment that really pushed the internet into chaos chaos was the release of the 300 names list. This is the part that had social media moving at lightning speed. Attorney General Pam Bondi revealed a list containing more than 300 names, described as government officials or politically exposed individuals who appeared somewhere within the files. And when people first saw the list, the reactions were immediate because some of the names were incredibly famous. Names like Jay-Z, Beyoncé, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson, Bill Gates, Michael Jackson, and Elvis Presley were all mentioned somewhere within the broader documents. Seeing names like that stacked together instantly grabbed attention and had everyone everywhere trying to figure out what it actually meant. Now, this part is extremely important to understand. Many of these individuals appear in the records simply because their names were mentioned in news articles Epstein saved, included in media digests, or written inside someone's contact book. Being listed in these documents does not automatically mean a person committed a crime. It does not automatically suggest involvement in anything illegal, and several officials have warned people not to jump to conclusions. In fact, one congresswoman publicly criticized the way the list was presented. She pointed out that including Janis Joplin, who passed away when Epstein was still a teenager, in the same list as convicted figures like Larry Nassar was misleading. Her argument was simple. When you throw hundreds of completely different names into one giant list, people start connecting dots that may not actually exist. But even with that warning, some names appearing in the files raised more serious questions. And that's where things start getting even more intense. Now here's where the conversation gets more serious. While many names appear in the files for simple reasons like news mentions or contact lists, a few individuals have documented connections to Epstein that people are still discussing today. One example often brought up is Richard Branson. Emails included in the records reportedly show direct social contact between Branson and Epstein, including invitations to Epstein's private island. In one letter, written just months before Epstein's arrest, Branson reportedly wrote, "It was really nice seeing you yesterday. Anytime you're in the area, would love to see you as long as you bring your harem." That message alone caught a lot of attention online. Branson's representatives later responded, saying that any interactions were in group or business settings, and that contact was cut off once the full extent of Epstein's behavior became widely known. Still, the emails were enough to keep his name circulating in discussions about the case. Another name that surprised people was Howard Lutnick, who currently serves as the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. According to the documents, he remained in contact with Epstein years after he had publicly claimed to cut ties. One email from 2012 shows Lutnick casually inviting Epstein to dinner. In that same message, he reportedly mentioned that 8 children between the ages of 7 and 16 were on his boat, which quickly sparked public criticism and calls from some commentators demanding his resignation. As of now, no official action has been taken. Then there's Larry Summers, the former president of Harvard University. Emails in the files show Summers asking Epstein for personal relationship advice, with Epstein even describing himself as Summers' wingman in their conversations. Those exchanges reportedly continued until just months before Epstein's 2019 arrest, which raised eyebrows when the messages became public. Summers later released a statement saying he was deeply ashamed of the connection and stepped back from several roles, including positions tied to Harvard and the OpenAI board. Another figure frequently mentioned is financier Leon Black, who reportedly paid Epstein over $150 million for what was described as estate planning advice. Black stepped down from Apollo Global Management in 2021, though he has never been charged with a crime. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice acknowledged that the released list may not even be complete. Officials quietly admitted that some names were left out due to the massive scale and speed of the document release, as well as ongoing investigations that were still active at the time. That detail alone left many observers wondering what else might still be buried in the files. Some sections of the files were completely redacted, meaning certain names were blacked out entirely. That detail alone sparked even more speculation online because it suggests that some of the most sensitive information and possibly some of the most powerful individuals may not even be public yet. And that leads to the name that has probably caused the biggest shockwave on the internet since these documents started circulating: Ellen DeGeneres. For almost 20 years, Ellen was one of the most recognizable faces on daytime television. Her brand was simple and clear: funny, friendly, and safe for everyone watching at home. Her slogan, "Be kind to one another," became part of her identity, and millions of viewers believed that message completely. Now, let's slow down and be very clear about what the documents actually show, because accuracy here matters a lot. Ellen's name does appear in the Epstein-related files. According to reports, her Twitter handle and clips from her show were included inside media digests that were sent to Epstein. Articles mentioning her show were also found among the materials he received. Fact-checking organizations like Snopes and PolitiFact reviewed these claims and confirmed something important. There are no direct emails between Ellen and Epstein, and no evidence in the documents connecting her to criminal activity. But here's the reason people online keep bringing her name up. For many viewers, it's not just one isolated detail. They say it's the pattern of events around the timeline that caught their attention. When people line those moments up side by side, they start asking questions, even if the documents themselves don't prove wrongdoing. For example, in November 2024, Ellen and her wife Portia quietly moved to the United Kingdom. Early headlines claimed the move happened because she was unhappy about the results of the US election. That explanation spread quickly, but the internet only ran with that story for about 48 hours before another moment stirred the conversation again. Then, Elon Musk jumped into the discussion. He reshared a post pointing to a 2016 birthday message Ellen wrote to Diddy, where she jokingly called him Cuddle McSnugglestuff and wrote, "You don't need to know why." Musk didn't add a long comment, just a single raised eyebrow emoji. And that one tiny reaction instantly sent social media into detective mode. The implication people online took from that moment was pretty obvious. Many commenters started saying Ellen didn't move overseas because of politics at all. Instead, they believed the timing had more to do with the growing investigations surrounding C.B. Diddy, as authorities began digging deeper into his circle. By that point, the case around Diddy was getting bigger by the week, and observers were watching closely to see which famous connections might come next. Diddy was arrested in September 2024 and charged with serious offenses, including sex trafficking and racketeering. Prosecutors alleged that victims were pressured into participating in recorded sexual encounters that he reportedly referred to as freak-offs. As those allegations became public, old clips from television appearances started resurfacing everywhere online. One clip people keep replaying shows Diddy sitting on the Ellen DeGeneres show years earlier. In the moment, he looks directly at Ellen and says, "I invite you to all my parties." Ellen laughs and responds that she never goes. At the time, it looked like a harmless talk show exchange. But now that same clip is being examined all over social media, with users replaying it again and again while debating what it might mean. Then, attention shifted to people who had been part of Ellen's professional circle. DJ Steven Twitch Boss, the longtime DJ and dancer on her show, someone Ellen often described as family, tragically passed away in December 2022. Around that same period, actress Anne H., who had previously been in a relationship with Ellen years earlier, died following a single car crash in August 2022. Because those events happened within months of each other, and before the Diddy investigation became widely known, many people online started connecting timelines and raising questions. There was also renewed attention to the workplace controversy surrounding Ellen's show. Back in 2020, dozens of former staff members spoke to reporters about what they described as a difficult work environment behind the scenes. Some employees claimed there was a culture of fear where people felt uncomfortable speaking up about problems. Warner Brothers launched an internal investigation at the time, several producers were removed, and public statements were issued addressing the situation. But one former producer from the early days of the show, Hedda Muscat, who had been involved since 2003, shared comments that caught a lot of attention, and what she said next added another unexpected layer to the conversation. One former producer didn't hold back when describing her experience behind the scenes. She reportedly said, "Phony, liar, hypocrite. We were all petrified of her. She was not nice." Statements like that shocked a lot of viewers who only knew her from her cheerful daytime persona. Then, in June 2025, comedian Margaret Cho added another story during a podcast appearance. Cho explained that she had known Ellen since the 1980s, back when both of them were coming up in the comedy world. But according to Cho, whenever she appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres show during the 2000s, Ellen acted like they had never met before. Cho said the interaction felt cold and distant, which surprised her considering their long history in the same industry. A couple months later, in August 2025, a former cameraman from the show also came forward with additional claims about the environment behind the scenes. Those comments added even more fuel to the conversation that had already been building for years. And this is the question that keeps popping up online. If someone could maintain a polished public image for almost 20 years, smiling on camera every day and repeating "be kind to one another," while former staff members later described a very different workplace atmosphere, people start wondering what else might have been happening behind the curtain. That question alone has kept debates going non-stop, even though there are still plenty of unanswered details. Now, rewind for a second to a moment many viewers barely noticed the first time it aired. Back in 2016, Justin Bieber appeared on the Ellen DeGeneres show. At the time, he was still very young and had already spent most of his life in the spotlight after becoming famous as a kid. The pressure of growing up in public was clearly weighing on him during that period. During the interview, the conversation shifted toward Diddy's parties, something Bieber had previously mentioned in interviews. The topic seemed uncomfortable, and while the moment was played off as a joke on the show, some viewers later revisited that clip and began analyzing it closely online. And around the same time these old clips started resurfacing, another strange trend popped up online. Discussions connected to the Pizzagate theory suddenly started trending on Spanish Twitter, pulling even more attention back toward the same circle of conversations. Soon, people in different countries started looking at old pop culture moments through a completely different lens. Fans were watching a famous pop star's music video and asking the same question over and over online. Was he trying to hint at something without being able to say it directly? That question spread fast across social media, and suddenly millions of viewers were re-examining clips they had seen years earlier. Then another moment exploded across the internet, an Instagram live stream involving Justin Bieber. During the live stream, someone in the comments wrote that if he'd ever been a victim, he should touch his hat. A few seconds later, Justin reached up and touched his hat. That brief second instantly went viral. Now, to be fair, that gesture could mean anything or absolutely nothing at all. But the clip racked up tens of millions of views, and it pushed people to start digging through every old interview, every awkward exchange, and every quiet pause they could find. Viewers began replaying past appearances frame by frame, including that earlier Ellen interview, searching for clues they might have missed the first time. While those discussions were spreading online, another celebrity name suddenly got pulled back into the conversation: Chrissy Teigen. And this time, people were sharing old clips and posts they said raised eyebrows. One resurfaced video shows Teigen on camera saying, "Nothing. I wouldn't eat or drink or try. I would eat a heat." The clip quickly started circulating as people tried to interpret what she meant. That alone sparked a wave of debate, but then users began digging through her old tweets from years earlier. Some of those posts, when pulled out of their original context, suddenly looked very different to people revisiting them during the controversy. Then came the moment that shocked the internet. In a single night, Chrissy Teigen deleted around 60,000 tweets from her account. Not 50, not 500, but 60,000 posts wiped away almost instantly. That massive deletion only fueled more curiosity online as people tried to figure out what had been removed and why. Now, fast forward to 2026, and with millions of Epstein documents spreading across the internet, Chrissy Teigen's name suddenly popped back into the conversation again. Online users have been linking her to Ellen DeGeneres through overlapping Hollywood social circles. In the entertainment industry, a lot of the same celebrities attend the same events, share the same friends, and move in the same spaces. But the detail people keep bringing up is still impossible to ignore. 60,000 tweets deleted in a single night. That's the kind of digital moment the internet never forgets. Years later, people are still talking about it, especially now that the Epstein files have pushed old celebrity connections back into public discussion. But now let's talk about a name that almost nobody in the English-speaking world was paying attention to when these files first dropped, and it might actually be one of the most surprising pieces of the entire release: Jack Lang. Lang is now 86 years old and served for years as France's Minister of Culture, becoming one of the most influential cultural figures in modern French history. Hidden inside the Epstein files is a short video clip showing Epstein being personally guided through a building by Jack Lang himself. That footage alone caught attention because it suggested the two had some level of direct contact. Then things got even more complicated when the French investigative outlet Mediapart started digging deeper into financial records connected to Epstein. What they uncovered raised even more questions. Back in 2016, Epstein reportedly opened an offshore account in the U.S. Virgin Islands. According to reporting, half of the shares connected to that account were allegedly owned by Caroline Lang, who is Jack Lang's daughter. That detail was surprising enough, but the timeline that followed made it even more shocking. Just 2 days before Epstein died in jail, he signed his will, and inside that document was a provision leaving $5 million to Caroline Lang. 2 days before his death, and suddenly a multi-million-dollar inheritance appears in the paperwork. Caroline Lang later told reporters that the offshore account was intended for art investment projects, and she said she was never actually paid by Epstein. However, reports also stated that the St. Thomas account had not been declared to French tax authorities, which quickly triggered more scrutiny. Following the controversy, she stepped down from her role as head of a major French film producers organization. Meanwhile, Jack Lang told French media that he originally met Epstein through Woody Allen, and he insisted that if he'd known Epstein was involved in criminal activity, he would have cut off all contact immediately. The situation has continued to raise questions ever since. Now, here we are in 2026, and with millions of Epstein documents spreading across the internet, Chrissy Teigen's name suddenly popped back into the spotlight again. Online users have been linking her to Ellen DeGeneres through overlapping Hollywood social circles. In the entertainment industry, a lot of the same celebrities attend the same events, share the same friends, and move in the same spaces. But the detail people keep bringing up is still impossible to ignore. 60,000 tweets deleted in a single night. That's the kind of digital moment the internet never forgets. Years later, people are still talking about it, especially now that the Epstein files have pushed old celebrity connections back into public discussion. But now let's talk about a name that almost nobody in the English-speaking world was paying attention to when these files first dropped, and it might actually be one of the most surprising pieces of the entire release: Jack Lang. Lang is now 86 years old and served for years as France's Minister of Culture, becoming one of the most influential cultural figures in modern French history. Hidden inside the Epstein files is a short video clip showing Epstein being personally guided through a building by Jack Lang himself. That footage alone caught attention because it suggested the two had some level of direct contact. Then things got even more complicated when the French investigative outlet Mediapart started digging deeper into financial records connected to Epstein. What they uncovered raised even more questions. Back in 2016, Epstein reportedly opened an offshore account in the U.S. Virgin Islands. According to reporting, half of the shares connected to that account were allegedly owned by Caroline Lang, who is Jack Lang's daughter. That detail was surprising enough, but the timeline that followed made it even more shocking. Just 2 days before Epstein died in jail, he signed his will, and inside that document was a provision leaving $5 million to Caroline Lang. 2 days before his death, and suddenly a multi-million-dollar inheritance appears in the paperwork. Caroline Lang later told reporters that the offshore account was intended for art investment projects, and she said she was never actually paid by Epstein. However, reports also stated that the St. Thomas account had not been declared to French tax authorities, which quickly triggered more scrutiny. Following the controversy, she stepped down from her role as head of a major French film producers organization. Meanwhile, Jack Lang told French media that he originally met Epstein through Woody Allen, and he insisted that if he'd known Epstein was involved in criminal activity, he would have cut off all contact immediately. The situation has continued to raise questions ever since. Now, here we are in 2026, and with millions of Epstein documents spreading across the internet, Chrissy Teigen's name suddenly popped back into the spotlight again. Online users have been linking her to Ellen DeGeneres through overlapping Hollywood social circles. In the entertainment industry, a lot of the same celebrities attend the same events, share the same friends, and move in the same spaces. But the detail people keep bringing up is still impossible to ignore. 60,000 tweets deleted in a single night. That's the kind of digital moment the internet never forgets. Years later, people are still talking about it, especially now that the Epstein files have pushed old celebrity connections back into public discussion. But now let's talk about a name that almost nobody in the English-speaking world was paying attention to when these files first dropped. And it might actually be one of the most surprising pieces of the entire release: Jack Lang. Lang is now 86 years old and served for years as France's Minister of Culture, becoming one of the most influential cultural figures in modern French history. Hidden inside the Epstein files is a short video clip showing Epstein being personally guided through a building by Jack Lang himself. That footage alone caught attention because it suggested the two had some level of direct contact. Then things got even more complicated when the French investigative outlet Mediapart started digging deeper into financial records connected to Epstein. What they uncovered raised even more questions. Back in 2016, Epstein reportedly opened an offshore account in the U.S. Virgin Islands. According to reporting, half of the shares connected to that account were allegedly owned by Caroline Lang, who is Jack Lang's daughter. That detail was surprising enough, but the timeline that followed made it even more shocking. Just 2 days before Epstein died in jail, he signed his will, and inside that document was a provision leaving $5 million to Caroline Lang. 2 days before his death? And suddenly, a multi-million-dollar inheritance appears in the paperwork. Caroline Lang later told reporters that the offshore account was meant for art investment projects, and she said she was never actually paid by Epstein. However, reports also stated that the St. Thomas account had not been declared to French tax authorities, which quickly brought more scrutiny. Following the controversy, she stepped down from her role as head of a major French film producers organization. Meanwhile, Jack Lang told French media that he originally met Epstein through Woody Allen, and he said he would have cut off all contact immediately if he had known Epstein was involved in criminal activity. Reports also suggested that Lang had used Epstein's car and private plane on several occasions, and this is where the bigger picture starts to come into focus. Because Epstein's network wasn't just American, it was global. Politicians, billionaires, business leaders, and cultural figures from multiple countries all appeared somewhere within the orbit of one man. And the biggest question people keep asking is still the same one: who knew what, and when did they know it? Now, I know a lot of people watching this are probably thinking the same thing right now. None of this automatically proves wrongdoing. Fact-checkers have pointed out that Allen has not been implicated in any crimes, and the so-called coded language hasn't been officially confirmed by investigators. So why do so many people still believe there's more to the story? For many viewers, the answer comes down to trust. Over the years, multiple scandals have shaken public confidence in powerful institutions. Cases involving figures like Harvey Weinstein, R. Kelly, and Bill Cosby showed how misconduct allegations could circulate for years before accountability finally happened. Even in the Epstein case itself, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted for helping traffic minors. Yet many people still ask why the broader network connected to Epstein has never been fully explained in public. The Epstein client list that has been released so far is partial and heavily redacted, and that leaves a lot of unanswered questions. When the most powerful people are involved, many viewers feel like the full story never fully comes out. And that's why debates around these files continue to explode online every single time new details appear. So now I want to hear your thoughts. Which name in this story surprised you the most? Do you think the full truth will ever come out from these documents, or will some parts stay hidden forever? Drop your opinion down in the comments because I read every single one. And if you found this breakdown interesting, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who wants the full story. More deep dives like this are coming soon, and you don't want to miss what we uncover next.